This is Pam Electric Ghost doing live on the air for his first time with Dre Baldwin, and I want to thank you for being on the show today. You are the creator of workonyourowngame.com, and so we'll talk about your story. But welcome to the podcast. How you doing this morning?
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a
Yeah,
little busy being a podcaster. We do
yeah,
live shows, so that's kind of our jam.
right.
Um, so one of the things I ask every guest before we get to the heart of your story, I always ask every guest, like, why do you do, like, what is your motivation in terms of like what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Well, I found looking back over my life and professional career through different industries and just with myself as a person that the thing that I do now, which is really helping people and organizations with structured execution, is exactly why I am who I am. That's how I live. That's who I am. Is what has worked for me on a personal level and doing the things I've done personally and professionally. So it only makes sense that I help other people on a personal and professional level do the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because you were an athlete,
Mhm.
professional basketball player. You turn a coach. You're a speaker. You're an author of over 40 books. You created the work on your game. Uh, Basically, you help other professionals and entrepreneurs, develop discipline and structure and execute their systems. What made you want to pivot like that?
Well, it's funny because Keith, it was a pivot because when you play a sport, you have a shelf life. It's only so long you can play a sport. Now, you can't
Mhm.
run and jump forever. And I was always looking for what's going to be the next thing because I always knew that I had skills that could take me outside of the realm of sports. In other words, just because I played a sport didn't mean I was limited to being a trainer or a coach after I was done playing. A lot of people who play a sport, they go become a trainer or a coach in that sport. So at the same time, I didn't want to completely drop everything that I had developed in sports and then had to start at zero in some other space professionally. So the question then became, what can I extract from my sports experience that can be used outside of the sporting world that people in the professional world, non-athlete professional world, that they would want? And the first thing I found was that people wanted the mindset piece. And then going on top of that mindset piece was the execution, the everybody doing their job the way their job's supposed to be done in a consistent way. Athletes need that, of course, because we have practice every day. We got games we got to play. You have training. And then in the professional world, people had to show up. They had to have a system and they got to follow the system. That's the part that a lot of people drop the ball on, is actually following the system. Same thing that happens with athletes. So that's how I figured out what the next move would be. And I was able to take some stuff from the past world and bring it into the new world. So it's not like I was starting at absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand. A lot, I think in today's world, people are so stuck in lanes.
Hmm.
And if you're like, I'm a creative person. I got hold a couple of hats. I'm a software guy. I'm involved in a startup. I'm a musician. I'm a podcaster. I'm a father. There's a lot of hats, but sometimes people give themselves a glass ceiling and they think I'm only an accountant. I'm only an actuary. I'm only this, and then they don't realize human beings are like made of multiple pillars, right? So you have your soul, your spirit, your heart, your mind, your body. If you only pay attention to your body, then you leave your spirit and your soul alone, then you'll feel like something's out of balance. And so I think it's like you can figure out how to weave that thread and find out how athletes and musicians, we all practice. We have that discipline. It's like a team sport. When you're in a band, you have to pay attention to your band members. You have to have situational awareness. You have to have done those 20,000 hours to know your instrument and then be able to handle if somebody plays a different note. What do? Do you just get like a deer in the headlights, or do you be able to riff on it?
Yeah, I agree. And that improvisation part and being able to respond in the moment to what's happening in front of you is not because you knew what was going to happen, is because you've done so much of the work in the background, or what I call doing your homework, and you understand the fundamentals and the basics so well of what you're supposed to know that when you get into a situation where things can be a little bit unpredictable, you can respond instinctively because you've already practiced every skill. So the skill that you need to respond with, you already have it. You just didn't know when or if you would need to use it, but you can call on it immediately because you've already practiced it so many times that you have it as part of your muscle memory. So it becomes an instinctive response, not something you have to think about.
Yeah, I think discipline is super important. In the creative space, if you're going to show up on stage, you got to have that discipline. Like if you're one of these guys, like what happens to musicians, like they go off for 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
they don't do anything other than kind of just like not be in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they try to get back in the game, it's like, whoa, I can't do it like when I was 17. I'm 35. Like, oh, I got to bring back that back. And so if you kind of just shut it off and then try to jump back and say, hey, I'm going to go 0 to 100 in a space of like a month, like you're going to hurt yourself.
Right.
And I think, it just seems like discipline matters more than motivation in a lot of cases. Like you could be motivated that you want to do that tour, but you're actually not ready.
Discipline matters more in every case. I can't think of a case where the motivation matters more than discipline. And the discipline is what is always there to be dependent on, even if motivation doesn't show up or if motivation goes away. So you can depend on the discipline to show up consistently all the time, even on days that you don't really feel like doing the job. And that's what keeps your muscles, so to speak, warmed up and you're ready to execute. Even after maybe some time off, you get back into the discipline, not just with the motivation, get back to the discipline of doing the work. Then maybe you can make that comeback. You can get back to where you were before.
Yeah, I think sometimes also we get stuck at like levels, like a professional might get stuck at a high level, and how do you break through to get to the next level? Like a lot of times, like if you get that competency, and then you just keep on kind of you're stuck in a loop, right? And sometimes it's like safe to be in the comfort zone of like you're a high performer and like, hey, this is my expertise. I do widgets. I'm the best at doing these widgets. My company's the best at doing this, but I want to do something else. Right. It's like, how do you pivot to that something else? Like you were able to apply the methodologies in sports and say, hey, that applies to anything. I can apply this to all kinds of entrepreneurial endeavors. It doesn't really matter. I can pivot. So if somebody thinks, well, I can't move from being selling soap to selling cars. Like how do you pivot? It's like, is it the same principle or is it not the same principle?
Yes. Well, using your example, it's still sales.
Yeah.
I mean, in sales, the process is the same. It's you get yourself in front of a prospect, you present a product or service, you extol the virtues of that product or service, and then you ask for the money. So whether you're selling candy bars for $1 at the county fair, or you're selling cars for $100,000 at the auto lot, it's still the exact same process. That, of course, how you talk about the products are different. The type of prospects you're going to be dealing with are different. The sales cycle is a different length, and your method for finding prospects will vary. But the principles, the underlying principles, are universal. Those don't change. The principles are etched in stone. So any principles that a person learns and they learn to apply in one area, those same principles will apply in other areas. And principles are what they are because they're universal. That's by definition, they're universal. So anything that you learn in one space can be transferred over to another space. The challenge, Keith, is that people have to figure out what are the principles that I've already learned that I'm already living, because most people have them. If you're a professional, you're able to hold down a career and a job at something, you're living by some principles, whether you know it or not. The question is which ones, well, what are they and how can this apply in the place where I want to go next?
Yeah, it's kind of like the Victorians had this idea called looking glass self, introspection. So you kind of have to look at like lessons learned in your life. So if you're just living your life and you're just putting out one fire after the other and you have like no sense of control, then you haven't really done that exercise. Like you haven't like figured out what works and what doesn't work. You just keep on thinking like, if I move to Detroit, maybe it'll get better. Maybe if I move to LA, it gets better. What's the common denominator? Why it's not good? You keep on moving from city to city, but what's the same thing? It's like it's you. So maybe you need to figure out like what's inside of you that's causing the problem.
Right. Louis Seneca talked about that. And anybody who's read anything on Stoicism, he talks about that. People move from one place to another place looking for happiness. But if you don't have that happiness within you, it doesn't matter where you move to, you're still going to have the same problem.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because a lot of people, they fail at execution. Um,
Yes.
and then they move to the next thing, and then they keep on failing at execution because we haven't solved the problem. It's like, I'm in software. We have to look at things called like use cases, business cases,
Hmm.
and we try to figure out like instead of trying to sell my solution and trying to make like a square, like a round hole fit in the square peg, you know, is like what are you doing? It's like, what is the problem? What is it that you want to do? Now I
Hmm.
can figure out all kinds of different solutions, but what is the core business problems? Like, give me the top 10, the top 10 problems you think you have, right? And then we'll go and look at it and try to discover it instead of saying, is this solution going to solve everything? A sales guy might say, I'm just going to try to sell you this, but it is trying to sell that because that's their goal is to sell that product. It might not even solve your problem. And then suddenly you think it is. So like if you don't identify what is going wrong, and that's a hard thing to admit because people don't want to admit what's wrong. But is that one of the first steps of like trying to get an execution that's going to actually work?
Yeah, well, what you're mentioning is making sure you're operating by an accurate formula. So people who work in technology, software, you have to operate by accurate formulas because I'm no expert in that space, but I remember computer science class in high school. If you got one line wrong, the whole thing broke.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that you have to make sure that you're asking the right questions and then taking those answers and applying them in the right places. So yes, whenever I'm working with someone, there are two things that I need to know in order to be able to help them. And number one is what is the goal? And number two, what's the problem? What are you trying to achieve and what do you think is in your way? And that could be a whole hour long conversation for me to figure it out. But I need to know what those things are. And sometimes it's just about asking the right questions of whoever you're working with, whoever has the issue, so you can get to the bottom of the situation. Because often people are operating off of inaccurate formulas. They think the problem is one thing when it's actually another thing. And then you go fix the thing that's not really the problem. You could make the situation even worse because now you got two things broken when before it was only one. So you had to be clear on what the actual problem is so that we can assess it properly. I mean, this happens in the medical industry all the time. You go to the doctor, they diagnose the wrong issue. So they give you medicine for what they think the issue is. That was not the issue. So the main issue gets worse. And then you got a new issue that wasn't an issue before. So that accurate diagnosis matters a lot.
Yeah, a lot of times it's like everybody has a filter, and so
Mhm.
like your mind filters out what it thinks is important. It's always trying to keep you safe. So like,
Mhm.
when you're in a conversation and somebody said something, the word triggers like your response, and then you're not really listening to anything else they said. It's kind of like
Right.
this situations. So then a good practice is like you ask somebody, is like, is that what you really meant? Instead of
Mhm.
making an assumption. Because a lot of times when we're trying to like gather like requirements from customers, like
Mhm.
we might interpret like we think that this is what they said, but we got to repeat it back to them. It's like this is what we heard
Right.
that you said is your problem. Is that accurate? I was like, no, 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 no. I actually meant this. And so it seems like human beings, like words are very important, and context is important, and everybody has their own filter. And so until you actually really interrogate what's really happening, because the perception is reality, you actually don't get it right. So have you
Mhm.
found that kind of situation where people are kind of crossing each other because they don't understand? Like there's no understanding.
Absolutely. And that's part of communication. A lot of people think that communication, Keith, just means your ability to speak, but communication, half of it is what you take in, is understanding what somebody else said. What did they say? What did they mean as opposed to what they said? And also, what did they not say? Because what I tell people, if you want to get good at communication, your job is not only to be very clear in what you say to others, but also you have to be very good at perception of what others say because not everybody's a good communicator. Not everybody is good at speaking or writing what they want you to understand. So they may be trying to make a point, but if they're not that good at expressing what the issue is, and all you go off of is what they say, then we'll never get to a solution because they can't quite explain their issue very well. So our jobs as strong communicators is to listen to what's being said, notice what's not being said, and then try to figure out what is this person trying to say, even if they're not that good at saying it. So, for example, the example that I give people is, like Keith, you mentioned that you're a father. So when you have a young child who can speak, but they're no expert at communication, they may be trying to tell you something and they may not be that good at getting it across to you. Now, when we're dealing with young children, especially our own children, we're not going to say to them, well, you didn't say that. You didn't say it clear enough. You didn't explain it well enough. We won't do that. You don't do that to your child. We try to figure out what they're trying to get across, even if they can't do it. But when we're dealing with adults, sometimes we get to doing that. We say, oh, well, you didn't say it clear enough. You didn't explain it well enough. Well, we have to offer that same grace that we would to a child. Like, this person just may not be that good at communicating, but me as a good listener, my job is to figure out what you're not saying so that we can actually solve the problem, because I'm not in the business of proving you wrong. I'm in the business of solving problems. So solving the problem means I got to be willing to listen and catch what's not being said.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking to a filmmaker and they're all about, there's a lot of nonverbal communication.
Right.
And, when I was talking to this film director, he's like, we spend a lot of time with the actors, talking about like what's not said and like what you're doing with your eyes, what you're doing with your hands, what you're doing with the way if you ever watch, classic films, you ever watch something like, anything Orson Welles did. And you look at like a lot of what he's doing is like, there's not a lot of words sometimes. There's not a lot of speaking. It's like his camera angles and how the actors are looking at the camera and so there's nonverbal cues, and musicians, we pick it up all the time because like we're on stage and we're not talking. We're like giving each other glances and nods and all kinds of like nonverbal communication that we kind of pick up on. Like you look at the drummer and you kind of look at him and he picks it up. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I should be doing. It's like, so there's this unwritten rule that we kind of have vibes. Human beings can pick up vibes. They can pick up that kind of frequency in the air to kind of get the feeling. Like if something's going wrong, if you're paying attention, you're not like stuck on the teleprompter. And you're giving a TED talk. Like you're trying to just go from your exact like speech, and then you don't pay attention to the crowd. Well, you're losing the crowd. So maybe you shouldn't stay on the script. Maybe you need to actually look at what's happening in the moment and adjust.
Right. And that makes sense. So as a musical performer, again, I haven't done music before, but a good performer is reading the room. Like while you're doing your performance and singing your songs and playing your instrument, you're reading how is the crowd responding to what I'm doing. And if you don't like the response, then you can make a little adjustment. Doesn't mean you stop doing the song. Maybe you do, but you make a little adjustment to get the audience back where it needs to be. It's the same thing someone like me would do as a professional speaker, if I'm doing some form of training. And then this goes back to what I said earlier, is this is why you do your homework. See, when you've done your homework and you know your set and you know all your notes and you have mastered the instrument or whatever you're doing, or as a speaker, you've mastered your speech, you've mastered your presentation, you can make adjustments on the fly without getting thrown off, because your conscious mind is not so focused on what you have to do because you already mastered what you have to do. Mm-hmm. Now you can make adjustments to what you're doing and it doesn't throw you off at all. And the audience, they don't even know that you made an adjustment. They just see that you picked up the pace and you got on the same page as the audience because you read the room, and you can only read the room when your conscious mind is free to pay attention to what's happening in front of you. But if you're consciously focused on, like you said, the teleprompter, because you don't know your presentation, now you can't read the room because you can't look at the room because you're looking at the teleprompter.
Yeah, I think that's like the perfection trap. Like when we a lot of times in creativity, we talk about happy accidents. And happy accidents happen like when you're an artist or a creative person, even like in your engineers. There's tons of examples like in engineering and invention where you had an idea, you had a very specific plan, and then suddenly something else happened, right? It was an accident, but the accident is actually better than your plan. Now, somebody who's really hung up on their plan will say, well, I'm not even going to pay attention to the fact that this accident is better than the plan. I'm just going to put it to the side, act like it didn't happen, and keep on going on plan. People who are more like agile, they'll look at that and say, hey, this is actually better than what we were doing. Maybe we should do this. And I think some people get, it's a kind of situation like, are you going to let that go, or are you going to actually embrace it?
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's being clear on what the outcome is. That's the reason why I said when I'm working with anyone, person or a company, first thing I want to know is what's the goal you're trying to achieve? And then what is the problem that you're running into? Because when we're clear on the goal, then everyone understands that we don't have to be married to the process. the process, we might throw that process out. We find a better process. We stumble across something that will better help us reach the goal. Then let's do this thing. Even though this wasn't the original plan, that's okay, because we're not married to the plan. As they say, you date the plan, you marry the outcome, you marry the goal. So the goal is the main thing. The plan is just something that we're using for now, as long as it's usable. When it's no longer usable, it's kind of like batteries, Duracell Energizer batteries. When the battery dies, you throw those out and you put new batteries in. So whatever is working to help us get to the outcome.
But it's like I find that like I used to work with like Fortune 500 companies when I was in my 20s. I'm in my late 50s. And now I work with smaller companies. I'm with a startup. And I found that working with startups, that I was a lot more excited, because even though I was in Fortune 500 companies and they would say they want, out of the box thinking, they want to be agile like the entrepreneurs, but they were so hung up on their bureaucratic processes that it just burned me out. I'm like, I can't deal with it. So I ended up working with startups, because in the startup situation, like you could just like you can be in a room with one of the founders, give them an idea, and it doesn't have to go through committee, and you actually execute and you do it and you get it done. So if you're the type of person who wants to get it done, I found it was like a lot easier to actually execute. And how do you get those bigger companies to become agile like that? Do you work on that?
Well, it's a great question. And technically, you can't make a big company do anything. Even if you work there, you can't make them do anything. First of all, it depends on the size of their bureaucracy, but big bureaucratic companies are bureaucratic for a reason, because there are many layers of decision making. If you have a good idea and you send it to one person, they got to bring it up the chain to 3 more people, and then it has to come back down the chain to them, and then they come to you. And even if you got a yes, it's still another 90 days before it actually gets executed. So you go into one of those bureaucratic organizations trying to change the world, the only thing that's going to change is you're going to get fired and get kicked out of the building. That's what actually happens. When you work with smaller companies, like you said, you can present an idea that day, get a yes that day, get paid that day, and start executing the next day. That's the difference when you work with smaller companies, or when you're dealing with an individual decision maker, which I generally tend to prefer as well. Is the give and take of it is, in the big bureaucratic organizations, you're dealing with people who are playing with money that's not theirs. So they tend to be a little bit looser with it, not as emotionally tied to it. And there tends to be more of it. So it's just a matter of what type of business do you want to have? Does peace of mind matter more than a dollar bill? And just what type of change are you helping to invoke in whatever it is that they're doing? So there's a give and take. There's no perfect scenario, no matter which way you go. But as far as answering your question, how do you get them to be more agile? Well, they have to choose. Somebody with some decision-making power has to choose to be agile. And then the other thing that would have to happen is some layers of bureaucracy would have to be removed. And in my experience, layers of bureaucracy, once they are installed, they don't go, they stay. Yeah. So you just have to figure if you're okay with dealing with it or not. And as you said, you got burned out dealing with it, because it's, exactly what needs to happen, but it can't happen because it has to go through this step and that step and that step. And then you're sitting there waiting, and you have something that can solve their problem. And there are people in there who also know, but they understand, like, okay, this is what it is. This is the situation. Yeah. So are you in or you out?
It's just interesting, because now we're in the age of this like AI revolution. Mm-hmm. And then what I'm finding is like, okay, they're going in and say, okay, we'll get rid of all the architects. We'll get rid of all the designers. We'll get rid of all the coders. We'll get rid of all these CRM people, customer service people. They get rid of everybody. And then suddenly you start getting all these complaints from the customer that the AI is actually making mistakes. It's not responsive. They're not actually doing as well as they thought, because it's like they think it's like a silver bullet. Like anytime there's technology, it comes in, everybody thinks it's a silver bullet. They apply the use case to the wrong problem. And then they think they can just use it for everything. There are very, very specific use cases for certain things, certain business cases that will solve things. You just think, oh, this is a one size fits all. And I think that's the problem with the AI revolution, my perspective. Like I have all kinds of certifications in AI, and I know it's a cool tech. I know what you can use it for. But there are people going around saying it's going to replace all musicians. It's going to replace all artists. All human knowledge has been transferred to AI. How could that be true? There are human beings that have knowledge that have never been transferred to the machine learning. So there's people trying to sell this, and I understand why they try to sell it because they're going to make money because they're selling it's something they own.
Yeah, that make a lot. Yeah. I agree with that. And companies, there are many companies who are making those moves. But what I think is going to happen is you're just going to have people whose job is to kind of manage and work with the AI. It's not going to, some people are going to get replaced. There are some jobs that won't be necessary, not nearly as necessary with AI if they're simple enough. And at the same time, there are going to be people who just need to step their skill up in understanding AI so that they can use it, manage it, keep it compliant, fact check it, make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing to help a company moving forward. But you're still always going to need human beings because AI is artificial intelligence. Where'd that intelligence come from? It came from people. So as long as you keep having people producing new ideas and new ways of doing things, then AI is feeding off of the people. So without the people, there's no AI. And AI, yes, technically is supposed to be able to get smarter, quote unquote, on its own, but it doesn't. It gets smarter based on inputs from people. So you're still going to need people one way or another.
It's like a circular loop.
Exactly.
And the thing is, most technology up to this point has been designed to assist humans.
That's right.
AI, a lot of these scientists are like, oh, it's designed to replace humans. That's not been the model.
Right.
Like the model has always been like create a tool that assists me. So like the correct use of it, like if you're an entrepreneur and you want to create like a micro like company like that builds like manufacturing with AI and robotics, you could actually do something with like 2 or 5 or 10 people that might have took 100 people. So then now you can actually build like a process where you could actually, with a 3D printing, you could build a manufacturing capacity that would have took like hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars that doesn't take that, right? It doesn't require all the workers. So you could build a company and suddenly you're generating $1 million of wealth with like 10 people, right? Where you couldn't have done that. So that's where the exponential capabilities, like if you have the idea, you can execute without all the overhead, without all the bureaucracy we were talking about. And that's where like people then, I think my problem is that a lot of Americans have been trained on an agrarian education system that wasn't designed to create thinkers. It was designed to create people on assembly lines and workers in the field.
Yeah, compliance.
So if you're suddenly going to do this paradigm shift and say everybody's got to be a creative thinker, well, you haven't been training people to be creative thinkers.
That's right. I agree. And yeah, I've long had negative things to say about the educational system in Western society because it was designed, as you said, to send people out of school ready to step into the factory and do the same thing you were doing in school. Show up, do your job, go to lunch when we tell you to go to lunch, and then go home when we tell you to go home, come back the next day, do it again. That is compliance and that works. But in creative fields, you want people who can think independently and come up with their own ideas, beliefs, and applications. The challenge is, even to this day, the educational system is still pretty much designed the same way. They haven't changed it that much. You even have teachers now, they're trying to combat students' use of AI. So what are we doing? Do you want people to be creative or do you not? So the education system is not supporting what I think a lot of business enterprises want, because we're not in the era of working with our hands anymore. That's not the thing that makes you valuable. What makes you valuable is working with your mind.
Yeah.
The school doesn't train you to work with your mind. So this is a problem. It's a
paradox. It's really like you're sending somebody into the cube and you want them to work outside the box.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Like, so how are you going to get that if you just train somebody to sit at the CRT and just type all day the same thing? Right.
Exactly.
And so the idea, like in a musician kind of world, is like, yeah, you can have somebody that just goes and grabs samples and grab all the James Brown samples, grab all the great funk licks, right? And then be really good at moving them around on the grid. And then you came up with something new, but you're not James, right? You're not like you're not like the great. You're not any of the great like artists. They actually came up with the riff. This is the problem I have a lot with the musicians today. A lot of creative people is like, are you Curtis Mayfield? Or are you taking Curtis Mayfield and then moving it around? Right. And this is where I try to train the kids. Like, if you learn how to play that instrument, you won't have to worry about clearing the sample because you wrote the piece.
Exactly. And then you
And you're trying
become
to get people to understand, well, that's hard. Yeah, yeah, of course it's hard. It's hard to do the discipline you had to do to become an athlete. You had
right.
to put the work in.
Right. And that's the work. And the work still matters. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people these days, Keith, need to appreciate. The work still matters, even though it may appear that there are some quote unquote shortcuts to doing the work. There are some ways that you can get the end result faster than what you did before. Like, for example, I've written several books. I've done a lot of writing over the years. Nowadays, you can plug an idea into AI software and it can spit out an article for you.
Print out the
Or,
whole book.
right, 20 chapters, you can write a whole book just using AI. And that's fine. Technically, you will have a book and it will have your name on it. The challenge is you haven't developed the skill of writing. So how do you formulate thoughts? How do you come up with an idea? How do you build a case? And as more and more people do the same thing that the person who made the AI book, if they do the same thing that you're doing, how is your style going to be differentiated from everybody else's style? Because you don't have a style. You never came up with it because you didn't do the work. So by doing the work, as you said, as a musician, when you come up with your own riffs and you write your own music, you come up with your own ideas and you compose music the way that you compose it, the work that you did in order to do that, you develop your own style, your own skill. And now, if you want to go use technology to help you get certain things done faster, you can do it with some level of authority because you've done the work.
Yeah.
But if you haven't done the work, so for example, I can go to AI and say, hey, write me an article in this style. Here's 20 articles I've written in the past. Use the same style that I use.
Yeah.
Now it's doing it with some level of integrity because it knows who I am. But if I just go in there and I've never written anything and say, write me an article, well, I don't even know what my style is. Somebody who
Yeah, you're
exactly.
just taking like a collage form of somebody else's styles.
Exactly, because that's all AI is. They just composed all the writing they got and they said, okay, this is how writing looks. But if
Yeah.
you give it your stuff, now it's going off my stuff. So if you read an article that I wrote without my name on it, you know it's me. Because if you read me before, you're like, oh, that sounds like
Yeah,
Dre.
because everybody has like their way of telling the story. And that to
Exactly.
me is the secret sauce. I always tell every
Yes.
musicians like you spend all your time trying to copy Beyonce, right?
Mhm.
But Beyonce already exists, right?
Right.
So if you just can clone her, that's cool. You can clone her. You can go do karaoke, right?
Right.
Like, you could go just play in a bar and say you can clone her, but like you're not going to go that far. Maybe you can play on a cruise ship, maybe you can play in a bar, but you're just copying her. If you want to
Mhm.
actually do something significant, you got to tell your story. But the problem is that requires you to be vulnerable.
Mhm.
Like once you tell your own story, then you're revealing something of yourself. I think a lot of people are scared of revealing themselves. So they rather go and clone and copy other people. But then that goes and puts out a lot of sameness, a lot of the same. And what we get AI slop. We
Yeah,
get
I
all
heard
this
that.
stuff. It's just derivative. It's not useful. People eventually get burned out. It's like, I don't like it. Like they turn it off.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. And what happens, Keith, is that what anybody, especially in a creative field, and even in non-creative fields, in the corporate world, you want to, in marketing, we call it building a moat around what you do. Now, how do you build that moat? There has to be something that is specific and individual to you, that's distinctive to you, that even if other people tried to copy it, even if they copied it successfully, quote unquote, they know where it got copied from. So someone tries to copy Beyonce, people would say, okay, that sounds good, but you're copying Beyonce. So it's still all roads still point back to Beyonce because
yeah.
you're copying her stuff. You're copying Coca-Cola. Okay, this looks like Coca-Cola. So you have to have a moat around your intellectual property or your style or how you do it or what you did, something about it, even if it's not owning a patent or a trademark with the government,
Yeah.
something that people, when they hear it or see it, they know that it came from you. Everything points back to you. That's when you become individual in the marketplace.
Yeah. Cause that's whether like if you build your own structure and you build like that moat around it, like that's when you have freedom. Like
That's right.
you get total freedom of knowing that people can copy me, but everybody knows like we hear James Brown, he's like, it's James, right?
Mhm.
The people who are derivative of James, people who are derivative of Michael Jackson, the derivations, but like everybody knows who the originators are, right?
Mhm.
Everybody talking about Steve Jobs, even to this day, in terms of like how Apple is different than other computer companies, right? In terms of their style. Even today, they have a sense of style to their designs. That's what they do. They care about art. in their designs. They hire a lot of artists. They feel that that is valuable to have artists, to not just have something that's kind of cold, calculating like, the IBM kind of model was. It's like, oh, we don't care about style. We're just going to deal with the algorithm. And that's
Right.
fine if that's what you want to do. But when you go and you set your brand, say, hey, art is part of our design. And it's always going to be part of our design. It gives you
Right.
'cause now that you have a differentiation in the marketplace, is like, hey, that's what it is. And that's what you kind of need to do when you set up your brand, right? You have to become like, have that brand identification.
Right. And I mean, Apple's a great example. So Walter Isaacson wrote the book with Steve Jobs, and he talked about how when you buy an Apple product, you open a box and it opens really slowly. That was a design choice by Steve Jobs. He said, I want it to be like that. I want the box to open really slowly. So it's like we're revealing something. It's like pulling the curtain back. And he wanted people who know PCs, I'm sure you do, that back in the day, you bought a PC, even still to this day, it comes with this big instruction manual. You open an Apple computer, there's no manual. You just open it, turn it on, and just start using it. There's no manual because it's very intuitive, right?
Yeah,
The person who knows nothing can use it without knowing anything about computers. And that was all part of his design, because his whole thing was, I want the average everyday person to be able to use a computer. I don't want it just to be for these really smart computer guys. I want anyone to be able to use a computer, and that's the outcome. So every decision Apple made was based on that outcome, and they still do that to this day.
yeah. I mean, it's so important to kind of do that. Cause like, why I kind of give an example, you go on like Instagram and everybody's trying to clone that cat video. You know, everybody's trying to do the cat video. This is the idea, but like every time you see these trends, somebody does something, then a million people clone it, and then they burn it out, and then somebody else creates a new thing. It's kind of like the TikTok thing. Like
Mhm.
people create these trends, get these micro trends, then they burn it to death. They just really burn it out,
Right.
and
Everybody does it. Right.
it's just like, well, how creative is that? Like it's risky to be like a Hendrix. And he went to the studio, and a good example was like feedback on record was not something you could do. The engineers would say you can't do it. You can't put it on the record. But Hendrix came in to the studio in 66, 67 and said, it's going on the record. And they were telling him, no, it can't. He's like, yes, it is. And he really pushed it. And so that whole rock style, they had never been heard. No one ever heard it on a record. He forced it because he believed in it. And he just kept on pushing, and he got engineers. Finally got an engineer that agreed that he would do it. Eddie Kramer, and this guy, and he actually put it down. But he had to fight for his idea. And a lot of times when you have that idea, everybody around you will say, no, that's a bad idea. And when you're the innovator, you're gonna get a lot of haters. You're gonna get a lot of people say no, 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 no. And that's a hard thing to deal with. To really be an advocate for your idea. You can't be a doubter in yourself.
Yes, and a bunch of people are going to say that's not going to work because it has not worked yet. And this is just human nature. People will get in your way and slow you down before you have gotten started or made something work. But once it works, everybody gets out of your way or they get behind you. And that's the way it works. And when you're trying to innovate, you might have to try 9 ideas that don't work before you find the one that does work. But you have to be willing to keep trying in order to find that one that works. And then you become the trend and everybody else follows you.
Yeah, and I think today it's so hard because the perfection trap. One of the advantages of computers are like the undo button, right? So that undo button, you keep on like, oh, I made a mistake, or you keep on redoing and redoing. And in the art world, it's like the mistakes that go onto the canvas, you can't undo, right? Like
Right.
so if you're a painter and you go onto that real canvas, not the digital one, there's no undo button. You have to put it into the world. It has to exist. In the virtual tech world now we're in, that canvas can be undone, and no one gets to see your mistakes because you kind of hold them back.
Mm.
And I think the world needs to actually see your mistakes.
Yes, and what's funny about that? When I was playing basketball, I used to put all these videos on YouTube, basketball drill videos. And if you look on YouTube now, you see a lot of people doing it. They'll just show you themselves making every shot, and they're doing all the moves perfectly. And people watch it and say, "Well, if you're that good, why aren't you playing for the New York Knicks or the LA Lakers?" when I would do my drill videos, I would leave the mistakes in there. So if I missed the shot, if I missed 5 shots in a row doing the same move, I would put all 5 misses in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a dribbling move and I dribbled the ball off my foot and it went off camera, I would leave that in there. And the players would see that and they would say, Dre, I appreciate the fact that you leave the mistakes in there because it shows us that the mistakes are part of the process and you're not just this perfect basketball player. Because again, if I was perfect, then I should be on TV playing with Kobe, right? So I'm not, because I'm not a perfect player. So showing the mistakes is part of the game. And they would also see that, okay, he messed up a bunch of times, but he also did it right a bunch of times. That's the reason why he's good. So people need to know that.
Yeah, I think that's the problem is like everybody, a lot of young kids are looking at all these influencers and they're thinking like, oh, that's who they are, right? But there's a filter on them, right? There's like that. They might not even really look like that. And how they talk is they've edited every single and ah and everything out. And kind of like the reason I do live podcasts, because I run into what I found, I've been podcasting since 2016. I've done like 1,400 episodes. And what I found is like in this generation today, is a lot of these guys are editing. They edit to the nth degree and make it look like that's not real life. Like I kind of like radio. I kind of grew up with radio. I like NPR. And I like the live format where people would talk to people in real life, like, and not pull out maybe something that wasn't like the best conversation, but it was a real conversation. Mm-hmm. And maybe it has ums and ahs and pauses, and maybe somebody didn't elegantly say something, but that's really what it is. And I find if you're trying to find perfection, it's like, well, that's not really accurate to life.
Right. And on the radio, you can't go back later and say, hey, can you take out that part where I said XYZ? It's just there. Everybody heard it already. So you got what you got.
Yeah. I just think that is okay. And young kids need to know, like you're saying, when you're showing them like you didn't hit all the shots.
Right.
It's okay that is part of the process. Every artist has all this stuff on the cutting room floor. Like everything's on the cutting room floor. There's tons of stuff that you never see before it gets to the gallery, before it gets to the theater, before it gets on stage, before any piece of art. There's a whole process. And these one overnight sensation, they were working 10 years before they became an overnight sensation.
Right. And people see the finished product. Like they see somebody like you say you've done 1,400 episodes of this show. You're polished and skilled now, but they go back and listen to the first 10 episodes. You probably don't sound as good as you do now. Yeah. Right? But those first 10 are still out there, right? Somebody can find them if they wanted to. So they can see the evolution. They can see the growth over time. And in the world that we're in today, you have is not only the filtering, but it's also the instantaneousness of everything. I mean, the app is literally called Instagram. It's immediate. Everybody wants everything immediate because when they look online, they see everyone else looks like they went and became celebrities in one day. So why can't I? They don't want to do the work, but the work you cannot, what's the word that I'm looking for here? You can't just go around it. Let's just put it that way. You have to put the work in. There's no substitute for that.
Yeah. I think and then also like, you have to understand like your limitations, like a lot of times when we have the working sessions in our like computer design, like people, they're like, we put it on the table. Like there's no bad question, right? Don't get embarrassed that like whatever you don't know, that's fine. Cause there's somebody else in the room that does know, or, so if you like, it's like when you're in school, everybody's afraid to raise their hand because they don't want to look bad in front of, they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look like they don't know. But when you're working together, like NASA engineers, they all have to admit like what they know and what they don't. They have to be very, very clear. Like when you get to that level of engineering, everybody puts it on the table, and you can't have ego. You can't be getting into that. You have to actually tell the truth because the people will die if you if you don't do the right thing. It's like there's certain levels of engineering, like you can't be playing around. You can't be like trying to like ego blast it around. You have to be truthful.
Right. And Jim Collins talks about that in his book, From Good to Great. And his book is about publicly traded companies, how they become great over time. And one of the things he talks about is you get all high quality people into the organization, and then they get in the room and they have knockdown, drag out fights about what the company is going to do. But it's not about anyone's personal agenda. It's just high level people all putting forth their best possible argument for what they think is the best idea, and they go at it. And then once they come to a conclusion, everybody gets on board with the idea. Okay, this is what we're going to do. And the fight over the ideas is not my personal choice over your personal choice. It's about what do we think is the best thing for the company. And then everybody gets on board and does it. And that's why the companies are so good.
Yeah, because when you get to critical engineering, stuff that's like affecting, like, like if you're building healthcare devices or surgical devices, you're building stuff that's actually going to be critical, stuff like for nuclear power plants. Like there's certain types of engineering. It's so critical. You can't be making mistakes.
Right.
So you really have to have everybody in that room like push on it. And it's not about like, hey, that guy's design's great, but it has to be like 99.99999 and it's 99.98. So it's not going to make the cut. And it's not about that you're not good, but that one's not going to work. So we're going to go with the other guy.
Right. So it's not about the person. It's about the execution. It's not about the individual. And a lot of people don't have the mentality to accept that.
Yeah, that's hard because like ego is hard to push your ego down.
Right.
It's like a natural thing. You don't want you get hurt feelings. People get dejected.
But right. And the key then, Keith, is separating your work from your person. So the stuff that I put out as my work, if you don't like it, that doesn't mean you don't like me. It just means you don't like what I did. And you had to be able to separate those two.
Yeah, I think that's a critical discernment that it's hard for some folks to kind of get the emotional intelligence to deal with that.
Right. And it also requires them to have a healthy enough self-image that they don't take criticism of something they did as a criticism of them. So my self-image is healthy enough that if you don't like 10 things that I did, that doesn't bother me because I know who I am as a person. I'm secure in myself. So you don't have to like what I did. You might like the next one, but if you don't like it, that's completely okay.
Yeah, it's super interesting. When you're dealing with the world today, there's so many cases where, I think people can't be a failed. There's this term in IT we call failing upward, because we have to continually throw things at the board. We throw things at it's like, and we throw it till it sticks. It's like, and it's not. It's not about like, oh, everybody's going to be a winner and everybody's winning a prize. Not everybody's going to get a prize. Like we don't live in a world like, sometimes kids today, everybody gets the prize. Right.
Yeah,
everybody gets the medal.
Yeah, the medal doesn't matter if everybody gets
that's one. That's not very helpful.
Right. It's not a medal if everybody gets one.
Yeah. So what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Exactly. So, and even in sports, I would tell athletes, listen, you don't need every team in college, athletes trying to play in college. You don't need every college team to like you because you only play for one team. So you only need one coach to like you because that's the team you'll go play for. If the other 300 don't like you, that's okay because you can only be in one place at a time. So you only got to be right. There's Mark Cuban, I think, from Shark Tank. He said that you only got to be right one time.
I think that's super cool. But I want to let people know we've got your QR code up. So if people scan that, they can go to your website. So if people go workonyourgame.com, what would they find there? That your books and everything that that you do?
Yeah, you'll see what we're focused on right now, which is we talked about earlier, the execution, reliability, structured execution. So that's our focus right now. But as far as social media and all that, you can find me on all the social platforms and you'll find links to my books and all that stuff there as well.
Well, I want to thank you for being here on a Saturday afternoon, spending time with us. We do encourage people to click on that QR link. We want everybody that watches our show, click on the links of the guests that we have on. We also have your Instagram there. And you have the website on the below, and you'll be able to click on that on the description on the platform that we've been on. We've been live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Kick. We will be on all the other major podcast platforms by the end of today. I want to thank you very much for being on the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
It was a great conversation, Keith. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.